Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to start our land use notes, and guess what? This is the very last set of notes. Today and tomorrow will be the very last set of notes until we are completely done with everything for this class. So yay, how exciting. The other exciting thing is that today you are going to do a lab, and the lab involves food, so things just don't get much better than that. But let's go ahead and take a look at land use. So think for a second, how do these different resources affect your daily life? We have soil, trees, minerals, energy such as oil and gas, and water. These affect your daily life all the time, even though we don't really think about it. Think about how every time you eat something, well, soil had to grow the food that you ate, or it grew the food that what you ate. So soil is super important. It also grows the trees, and the trees are going to be important for oxygen, as well as the frame of your house, the frame of this building, the paper you're writing on. All of that stuff is made from trees. Minerals, if you like technology, you like minerals, because that is part of the technology that you have is made up of different cords and wires that have minerals within them. Energy, oil and gas, if you like heat and you like light and you like your cell phone, you like energy. And then water. Hopefully, one, you're drinking the water, and then two, hopefully you bathed or at least brushed your teeth today. So all these things affect our lives in many, many, many ways. Don't write this down, but although it's necessary to use these resources, we do have to remember that every time we use them, it has a consequence. For every action, there is a consequence, whether it's a good or bad one. But what we are going to be focused on for this environmental section is when we have such a rapidly growing population, our resources have to be conserved so that we have enough for the population as we continue to grow. This is a review, so unless there's something that you just did not write down in Unit 6, then you don't need to write stuff down. So that's a good thing about this set of notes, is it is filled up with so much review, which is great because you're about to take your NCFE in a couple days. So water consumption. 70% of the Earth's surface is water, which we know. Most of that is the ocean. 97% of that 70% of water is salt, leaving us only 3% of fresh water. We know that 2% of that fresh water is frozen, so we have less than 1% that's usable to us. So that's just kind of how our water is broken up, which is why we need to conserve. Because remember, we have water balance, but water balance is precipitation equals evaporation globally, not locally though. So even though we have the same amount of water on the earth at all times, it's not always in the same place, and it's not always fresh water, because sometimes it goes back to the ocean. So the water cycles through the earth while conserve, and that's because of the whole water balance being global but not local. Moving on, I have the bolded stuff that you do need to write down. So water consumption, agriculture, well, hopefully you know this one, so if you do, you don't have to necessarily write it. But agriculture is where most of our water goes to in the form of irrigation. Remember, irrigation is when you are watering crops. It's the water that farmers are going to use to manage the farms. We also have an issue with all this irrigation, though. It can create dry areas. So if the farmers are using up a ton of water, partially because they need to, and then partially because some may not have the best water conservation practices, they can deplete our groundwater. So this is the issue with agriculture overusing water, is depleting groundwater. It can create those dry areas, which can, one, lead to drought, two, it can create sinkholes, it can just do all sorts of things. And this is the other big thing that it can do that people don't necessarily ever think about. So definitely make sure you write down this bottom point. But over time, irrigation can cause salt to build up in the soil, and plants don't like to grow in salt. So if you are constantly pulling water from one place and watering all your crops, then those minerals build up in the soil, and they're minerals that aren't necessarily good for the plants. So when you have the salt build up, it makes it useless for growing plants. You got to bring in new dirt, you got to bring in fertilizer, all that stuff. So over irrigating can deplete groundwater and cause salt to build up. Those are your two big things. Hopefully you're done writing that down, because I don't really have anything else to tell you about it. So I'm slightly pausing for a second in case some of you are writing super slow. but your time is up, so let's keep going. Mining. And all of this is bolded, so write it all down. So mining is how we get a lot of different resources. For one of the resources we get is coal. And as you remember, coal is one of the most abundant fossil fuels, but it's also one of the dirtiest fossil fuels. And the way that we get it isn't so glamorous either. There's two types of mining. You have surface mining and you have underground mining. In the picture to the right, what you see is surface mining. Surface mining obviously takes place on the surface of the earth. And one reason it's so bad is because it destroys vegetation, and it was getting rid of all the vegetation, because look at that picture. You don't see any plants growing anywhere. They had to cut all that down. They had to get rid of all the topsoil. There's nothing left. And because there's nothing left, they've destroyed all the habitats. And what this does is it scars the land. So think about if you get cut, and it's a deep cut, then you probably are going to have a scar from it that's going to be with you for pretty much your whole life. Well, that scar is your skin has healed, but it'll never quite be the same in that one spot. Well, that's how mining is. The land will heal, but it will never be the same. A couple other negative side effects of mining is it causes soil erosion and a ton of air pollution, and it destroys ecosystems. If you know it destroys habitats, then that's kind of self-explanatory. But when you get rid of everything like that, it does obviously you're going to have a lot of erosion, because there's no vegetation. And remember, roots hold down the dirt to prevent erosion. So with all that gone, all your dirt can wash away. And that's a big deal because there's so many pollutants created in mining from coal dust and stuff like that, that if that erodes away with the soil, it can really poison water. Coal dust is extremely, extremely toxic. So you have all that pollution that's created, and then it's easily eroded and moved away. Also, if you take a look at the picture, you'll see a lot of machinery. They use a lot of fossil fuels while trying to get fossil fuels. So that in itself is a negative thing. So I'm going to keep going. If y'all need to pause the video to finish taking these notes, feel free to, but still write quickly. End of the year, you should learn how to write fast by now. But I'm going to move on. Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act. Everybody say reclamation. Okay, reclamation is when you reclaim the land. And if you just want to write that would be fine. Just put the Reclamation Act equals reclaim / restore the land. So after you mine and you mess up a bunch of the land and all that stuff, you have to go back. There's a law from the U.S. that requires miners to reclaim, aka restore the land as much as possible. So they're saying you can't just leave that big mess there. You can't destroy everything and just leave it like it is. You've got to go back and you've got to pay your money, and you've got to make sure that this land is clean and that it's livable and that vegetation can grow back on it. And what they like is to have it more just than that grass can grow, but hopefully one day they can have it so that the land could actually be farmed on or used for something, because we can't just waste space, because that is a limiting factor if you remember us talking about that in our population notes. So mining is at the cost of the miner. You remember, you're mining to make a profit. It's a business. So you're trying to get the ore out. You're trying to get the coal out. You're trying to get out all these good things to sell, to make money. And then after you make all that money, because mining itself is going to put you in the hole with debt, because you got to buy the land and do all the work before you can get anything to sell to make a profit. Once you finally make that profit and you pay off all your debt from the beginning, now you've got to take more of that money and pay it back to restore the land. I'm going to show you a video, and this guy, he thankfully goes a little bit over and beyond what he has to do. So he puts in more cost than what he has to, which is just a really cool thing because he actually cares about the environment. So I'm going to let y'all pause this video and switch over to watch the reclamation video. You don't have to time how long